So let's move forward into the next game here. The next one we're looking at, played in this week 8, was Geek Masters at the 5 rank versus Lightning, who's like right on the cusp of getting into that playoff seeding picture. The score of that game, it was one of the tighter ones on the week, 81-79 Lightning. Lightning pulls it off with a little bit of buzzer beater action from his buddy Neil Rakers, or should I say Rackers. But it was pretty cool to watch Monday night. I had to jump on the message board immediately because I'm looking at the scores. It's 79-72. Geeks got the lead going up against just a kicker. You're feeling like there's a pretty decent chance that you're going to win that game. And wouldn't you know, on like the very first possession that Houston has, dude gets set up for a 53-yarder. And I don't know if you saw it, but this thing was fading the whole time left. And it dropped in, and it smacked off the crossbar. And all the announcers were like, oh, he missed it. And I'm thinking, well, there's no way that was good because just the way the ball landed. But here it, like, hits the left upright, and just the way that it smacked off the thing, it ended up dropping straight down to the ground because obviously 53 yards is Neil Racker's absolute maximum range. But he got it, man. It was so cool. But then he ended up posting a couple of extra points after that to clearly win the game, even though he had it on a tiebreak anyway over Geek. But just a cool ending to that game. Also, Drew Brees put together some decent numbers in a kind of a surprising matchup against Pittsburgh. But if you saw Drew Brees last week against Cleveland, you knew that they were going to come out firing this time around. It didn't matter if it was Pittsburgh Steelers or anybody else because it was going to be a Drew Brees game. He ended up going for 300 and a couple of touchdowns. Still had a pick and a fumble. There's 4 more points that he could have had added to the tally as well. Outside of that, it was Mercedes Lewis, man. That Jacksonville smashing of the Dallas Cowboys. It was a lot of nice statistical outbreak there for Mercedes Lewis. Only 2 catches. Okay, guess what? 51 yards worth of catching and a couple of touchdowns is all he caught. So not getting a lot of looks, but he's getting them where it matters most, and that's down by the end zone, I should say. So despite the fact that the Chargers defense, who just lost Sean Merriman to the Buffalo Bills, believe it or not, they posted a 0. Lightning didn't need it. You look at Geek Squad, not much showing up there. St. Louis Rams defense surprised the hell out of everybody with 21 points, but they're a team that's definitely on the rise. Them in Detroit, I'm telling you. I was talking to one of the other owners in the league this week. They're not the same. You know, you look at the Rams in Detroit, and you think, oh man, I got matchups against the Rams in Detroit. I'm set. It's not working out that way anymore. These defenses are changing. These new coaches are bringing some different energy. The players that you can tell that they're a little bit better at selecting and retaining talent. And some of these draft picks that now the Rams are pulling in, when you think about Chris Long, for one thing, some of these defensive picks are starting to pay off because of the pieces that they're putting around. Free agents are wanting to come to these teams because of the coaching staff. Things are changing rapidly in St. Louis and Detroit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them start, coming out ahead in wins versus losses in the near future. But I'm getting off on the wrong subject. Going back to Geek Master's scoring output, again, he only lost by 2 points. Didn't get much out of Hasselbeck, didn't get a whole hell of a lot out of John Carlson, and I'll tell you what, he drank that Kenny Britt Kool-Aid, and Kenny Britt hung up a goose egg. I realize it was due to injury, but, I mean, you couldn't expect that he was going to have another, huge output. It is still Vince Young throwing the rock around for Tennessee, so you probably don't want any wide receiver Tennessee's putting out on the field at this point, but I could be wrong. Frank Gore, he's okay. He's doing fine. 118 yards and a touchdown, 22 points. Miles Austin showed back up finally and a lot of junk stats time, but he had 7 catches for 117, so that was nice to see. Unfortunately for Geek going forward, as he moves to 4-4, he's playing the Rattlers in this upcoming week, which, again, he's already beaten the Rattlers once this year. She only put up 66 points against them in their Week 7 matchup. These are the ones you have to win. But when you look at the roster here, unfortunately, you're taking Kenny Britt, which, again, maybe not a big deal, but you're taking Kenny Britt and you're taking Frank Gore, which is a big deal, out of Geek Masters lineup this week on bye weeks. So now you start looking at things like, I don't know, you got Michael Turner going against the Bucks. That's probably going to be okay. But, do you want Marion Barber in there? Or do you want Ahmad Bradshaw in there? It's hard to say. So we'll see what happens going forward for Geek Master. But he's definitely in the crossroads right now. He's 5th ranked. He's sitting at 4-4. So if he was to lose this week, it's not the end of the world for him. You know what I mean? But some of these other teams down at the bottom that are 3-5 right now, are starting to make that climb maybe. So Geek's got to tighten up his belt and get that right roster submitted, because when you're playing the Rattlers, that's one you got to kind of win. No offense to Linda, but she's having a tough year, and you got to come out on top in those particular matchups. So that's what Geek's looking at. Now Lightning, again, we mentioned he got the win. He moves to 3-5. He's taking on fellow 3-5 in the Nutbusters there, who right now is holding on to that 6th seed for the playoffs by the skin of his teeth. So this is a real pivotal game right now for playoff seeding. The winner of this game, depending on what the Raiders does, is going to be sitting pretty for that final playoff spot with only a few games left to play. Lightning's not looking at any kind of real serious bye week issues in his lineup this week, which is good news for him. The question really becomes: Are we going to have D'Angelo Williams back off of injury, or are we going to have to go after, who's going to play with Ryan Matthews? Basically, is what it's coming down to. Is D'Angelo going to be back? Got a decent matchup, I believe, against the Saints if he's healthy. So it's a pretty big if at this point. We'll see what happens and how that plays out. We'll move on to the final game from Week 8 that we're going to talk about, the Pigpen Battle. And always, we go through these games based on the point output for the winner. So the winner of this game put up the least points by any winner in the entire week, and that was our good pal, the Nutbuster, who rolled up a win over Voodoo, 77-74, another nail-biter, another one of those nights where Nutbusters is obviously going to be sitting in front of the TV for Monday Night Football watching, that last guy on the team he's playing against put him away and go to bed with a little broken heart. But this time Peyton Manning said, "It's okay. It's okay, Nut. We're going to take care of you. I got to throw the ball at Reggie Wayne a little bit, but not too much." Because Reggie Wayne went in there and got his catches, only 4 of them, thank God, for only 39 yards. One of them was a touchdown. There was another touchdown pass that was left on the field to Reggie Wayne, and if Voodoo watched the game, he knows what I'm talking about. Peyton had him, man-to-man, on the island, little double move, broke free, got the separation, and probably one of the very, very few times in your life you're going to see Peyton Manning miss on a wide-open deep ball like that, because if he hits that, that's going to change things a little bit in the score output. And Voodoo's probably sitting at 3-5, and Nuts sitting at 2-6. So, but at any rate, it didn't happen. It wasn't to be. Nuts at 3-5, got the 6th seed right now. We mentioned he's getting ready to play Lightning for the first time this year, who's also battling for that last spot. Voodoo's at 2-6, taking on the Raiders. Again, it's not over for a 2-6 team. You just pretty much got to win out to get into playoffs. And when you're playing against some of those sub-500 teams like the Raiders, even though Raiders is kind of sneaky good right now and got a little bit of a hot streak, you got to win those ones. If you're going to get back in it, you got to beat the teams that are sub-500. He's already played the Raiders once and lost to them in Week 7, so he's got that history going against them right now. For Nut, again, it was Peyton Manning putting up 22 to get the job done. Darren McFadden and Percy Harvin decided in those afternoon games to save what was a disgusting 21-point output for Nut for the first part of the afternoon. Darren McFadden ends up cranking off 100 yards. Percy got his 100 with a 2-point conversion. So those guys with Peyton were just enough to get the job done. Unfortunately for Voodoo, one of the very few nice games out of Maurice Jones-Drew was wasted. He put up 19. That Green Bay Packers D pitched a shutout against the Jets and only scored 14 as a result. So unfortunately, usually you'd think you get a little bit more out of that, but there wasn't a whole lot of turnovers, wasn't a whole lot of sacks and stuff like that. And then, of course, Jason Witten showed up big, and he's done that now in the last 2 weeks after coming out of the gate soft. So, that's something to look at. With Romo being out now, Romo's more all over the field, spreading things out. Now it looks like with Kitna's looking to be a little bit more cautious, a little bit more patient, wants to do the safer thing with the ball. There's nothing safer than working the middle of the field with a great tight end, and Jason Witten is definitely that guy. So I would expect big things from Witten here to finish off the year as long as Kitna's playing quarterback. So again, for bye weeks next week, Voodoo going against the Raiders again. The biggest one for him, and it's a big one, Jones-Drew is going to take a seat. Now, he hasn't had a great year, but he is still Maurice Jones-Drew and can do big things. For Nutbuster, it's a little bit more significant, but not all that much. Steven Jackson, who took the week off last week anyway, putting up 5 fantasy points, he's on a real bye week now, but he has been up and down all year anyway. Santana Moss is on a bye with Chris Cooley on a bye, but I'll tell you, with the whole mess going on in Washington with McNabb's cardiovascular endurance, Nut, if he's got any sense, probably not going to want to get involved in too much Washington Redskins passing game at this point in time. Not if you got Rex Grossman taking snaps. So that's what's going on for bye weeks. That's what's going on in the league. Appreciate you taking the time to get with me today and enjoy the show. Again, if you got any feedback for me on what you're seeing or what you're not seeing, or if I'm missing details on things, please text it to me if you got my number. Put it on the message board to me. I'll tighten it up a little bit. I do appreciate it. The commissioner gave me some feedback after the last set of recaps that I did where I had the tiebreaker and stuff wrong. So, again, I appreciate your time. I'm glad you guys are watching the recaps, and I do really appreciate the positive feedback that you're giving me regarding the recaps. So, hey, have a good night. Enjoy the sounds of the darkness, because you know what? I want to let you know, I believe.